Natural disasters, conflicts, and public health risks have serious human, economic, and social implications, and vulnerable groups like citizens living in informal settlements in urban areas are generally most affected by it. In recent years, countries in sub-Saharan Africa have been impacted by disasters like the Ebola virus, COVID-19 pandemic, locust plagues, flooding, and droughts. When disaster strikes, governments need to support the most vulnerable citizens while also providing economic relief and adequate social protection. To achieve this, resilient public financial management systems need to be in place. Through the provision of their external audit and assurance, supreme audit institutions are ideally positioned to contribute to the national efforts to mitigate disaster risks and ensure the overall disaster preparedness of governments. In June 2020, AFROSAI-E, the African Organization of English-Speaking Supreme Audit Institutions, embarked on a research project to determine the level of resilience of SAIs in sub-Saharan Africa to meet stakeholder expectations during the COVID-19 disaster. Specifically, the research paper revealed that sub-Saharan African SAIs encountered several internal and external challenges, which negatively affected their level of resilience to disaster situations. In response to this research, AFROSAI-E designed a pocket guide for Supreme Audit Institutions, or SAIs, to provide them with guidance for responding to disaster situations throughout the 3 phases of a disaster cycle: pre-disaster, emergency, and post-disaster. The pocket guide also dwells on principal issues in the performance of real-time audits and disaster preparedness audits by SAIs before and during a disaster situation. This handbook was developed with the assistance of the Good Financial Governance in Africa program, funded by the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and implemented by GIZ. The pocket guide has 3 sections. Section A, nature of this pocket guide, covers the objective and scope of the guide, as well as key definitions. Section B, SAI responses through disaster cycle, provides guidance and considerations on how SAIs can prepare and respond to disaster situations. Section C, conclusions and useful links, gives a brief conclusion and useful links and resources available to support SAI. Let's look at some key recommendations which SAIs should put to consideration during the disaster cycle, and the variety of responses SAIs can employ as per Section B of the Pocket Guide. Pre-disaster phase. Before a disaster, governments focus on prevention, mitigation, and preparedness measures. During this time, SAIs should focus on their internal and external environments. Internally, the SAIs should focus on preemptive capacity building, which includes the ability to carry out their core business remotely, performing special audits, technological adaptability, internal disaster preparedness protocols, and resilient monitoring and evaluation systems. Externally, the SAIs should perform activities which advise government on its level of preparedness to respond to disaster situations, using PFM diagnostic tools such as the AFROSAI-E Public Financial Management Reporting Framework. This includes doing disaster preparedness audits and coordinating the work of SAIs with other key accountability actors. Emergency phase. The emergency phase tends to bring various operational challenges that SAIs need to respond to. Evidence collection and audits can change. Work-from-home scenarios may limit access to information and records, and so forth. It's therefore essential that SAIs have contingency plans in place to revise their client universe during the emergency phase and demonstrate flexibility in changing plans when a disaster strikes. To weather the storm, SAIs need to build their internal capacity by enhancing technical staff capabilities, embracing technology, and ensuring they have the necessary financial resources to carry out disaster-related audits in real time. Most importantly, SAIs should maintain effective communication with their key stakeholders, remind decision-makers of the importance of adherence to control measures, and take an advisory role for introducing agile budgeting, accounting, and payment processes in response to the disaster. Finally, SAIs should ensure that they always protect their professional independence while also monitoring the government's budget execution decisions and actions. Post-disaster phase. After the emergency disaster phase, SAIs should support post-disaster rehabilitation and reconstruction activities. The goal is to rebuild and restore while learning from the previous disaster to reduce future disaster risks and restore services and the functioning of the economy, affected institutions and societies. Governments often create special funds to mobilize donations for emergency response, to which the public and private entities can contribute. But SAIs don't always have a mandate to audit the spending from these special funds. That's why it's important for SAIs to ensure that they have a mandate to audit expenditures from blending funding and aid resources during this post-disaster phase. Even more importantly, SAIs should ensure that auditees are prepared for the post-emergency disaster audits. This means communicating closely with these entities and with Parliament to ensure that audits are conducted smoothly and stakeholder expectations are met. To assist SAIs in this area of post-disaster audits, the AFROSAI-E research on SAI resilience during disaster periods has an annex with several post-disaster phase subject matter areas for SAI auditors to consider as potential post-disaster audits. For a country to effectively overcome a disaster, it is important for its government to be resilient and prepared. This means that PFM systems need to be adaptable and flexible, and SAIs need to help ensure disaster preparedness of PFM systems for the benefit of all citizens. Overall, SAIs should play a key role in reviewing and strengthening recovery efforts, financial management and governance systems, and government preparedness for future disasters. We encourage SAIs to download the AFROSAI-E Pocket Guide to equip your team with an improved understanding on how to respond to disaster situations.